So the point is, it's your insurance policy. Like, you don't mess around with something as important as your brain function. You're using it for like every other decision today. You want to get rich, you need your brain. You want to live a long life, you need your brain. You want to avoid cognitive decline, you need your brain. Like all of these things, you want to have energy, you want to sleep well, you need your brain. You want to be a present father, mother, you need your brain. Why mess around? I've been the person. I know that someone telling me that I'm heading for burnout when my company's success depends on the minutes and hours I put in. You know, you couldn't have at the time told me your experience and stopped me from doing more. It's just that simple, because I had everything at stake. It's mismanaging your energy, mismanaging your diet, mismanaging your body. You do that, your brain sets off alarm signs that your house is on fire, and unless you put it out and start feeding yourself and hydrating yourself and giving yourself the right amount of sleep, it all just goes to shit. And I've reflected on this a lot and apologized to my mum, etc. I grew up with 10 years of not apathy, but you have to understand what happens to a developing young mind who is being told dad's going to die, then he doesn't die, then told he's going to die, then he doesn't die, and on repeat. What basically happens is you become a bit apathetic to it all. The benefit of that is 4 years of building a company that was a rocket ship for a period of time and then totally imploded is I learned so much about the things that matter and how to start properly. Most people that experience mental health issues will fall down for the same kind of things, and a lot of those circumstances you can turn around. You just have to believe that you can turn them around, and your lifestyle is usually the things that will dictate whether they'll improve over time.
So this is Vulnerable, the first founder mental health podcast powered by Foundrs to boot. Let's get into it.
Yeah, so you don't do any
well, no, I don't personally now, but the team does.
Right.
And so, but what the team do is they give me crib notes, which are great. And what we tend to do now, which is a really great, but it's very specific to secret leaders, right? So it depends on your content, but we ask them their top 5 moments of their life, or those 5 most meaningful moments, so that we have like 5 ideas of stories or angles that we can go in. Some might be business, some might not. And we ask them, and we basically ask them like, what is the best story that they have in their arsenal? Like, what's their favorite story? Doesn't have to be business at all, but like, what's the thing that brings the house down that they tell at dinner parties and stuff like that? It was just quite good. Like, not all guests do this, but most do. Most are pretty good with doing it in advance, and that's like actually better reading than their story. Because it's like the stuff that they want to talk about.
Yeah, I stopped doing prep, and actually I find, like you, it makes for a far better episode. Partly because I've got no idea where it's going to go. I've got kind of outline in my head, and I've looked a bit at your LinkedIn. Obviously, I've been following you for ages. Start off this with an apology, because we actually recorded on my other podcast, and I never released it.
It's okay. I can live with that. It was the pandemic.
Yeah.
The thing is, I don't know if you're recording, by the way, but
we are. Yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
So for me, I have a rule, because I do, I'm not a celebrity, but I still get so many inbounds and requests, and especially podcasts, right? Because everyone has a podcast. So it's like, you have to have some methodology at a certain size. At some point, when you have like a volume of requests, limited time, you have to have some kind of framework for how you say yes or no to things. So, on the one side, if Steve Bartlett asked me, I'm like, yes, obviously, I'll do that happily, thank you. But then, so that is like a no-brainer, happy to do it, and also great video content. So it's like good for personal brand and all this stuff. If it's someone I've never met before or whatever, the answer is like default no. However, the amount of people that have like randomly DM me who have got me around to doing it, for me, all comes down to how many times they ask.
Interesting.
So patience.
Interesting.
Because I have that experience as a podcaster myself. I go after guests that I shouldn't be able to interview and I have no right to, and all of this kind of stuff. And they say no, and I persist. Maybe it takes 1 year, maybe it takes 2 years, but they eventually come on. And I think it's because they respect and admire the hustle. That's part of the entrepreneurship game. So particularly if it's entrepreneurs, and they give up and they're like, never mind, see you later, whatever. I'm like, you know what? You know, the other side of the stat, which is kind of what you're alluding to here, except you've gone more professional, is, you know, what is it? 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 8 or something. So it's literally a waste of my time. Like literally, and not in a rude way. It literally is a waste of my time because it will not come out.
Correct.
So I have to have some kind of filter. So my filter is no to everyone. But if you keep asking and enough time passes, 6-9 months or whatever, and you're still going, fair play to you. I respect that.
The rut we had, yours was season 4. And actually I never released season 4.
Yeah.
I just got on my own rut with it. And I didn't feel congruent with the kind of content that I was releasing. Not saying that episode was shit. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, if you're not interested in what you're currently talking about and the focus, and you have a new passion and new area of interest, it's more exciting to you. That's just evolution. That's fine.
Yeah. Well, that's it's good to know. And thank you for being so nice about it. I really should release that season because I had some fucking great guests on there. But Jamie Catto, who most people won't know, but he was one of the founding members of, here we go. What was the band that sang Insomnia?
Oh, Faithless.
Yes. Yeah. And he's just loose. And then I had Don McGregor on, who's actually going to come on this one. And of course yourself and a couple of others. But
I would just focus on this.
I am going to focus on this because this is...
The hard thing is always focus anyway. Like, it just is. Like, the things that I've learned, which is hard because, like, you know, it's easy for me to say this to you and it's much harder to do. But, like, people like to discover a podcast and understand what the topic is and the kind of things they're going to expect. And, yeah, they like some surprises in between, but all the diverting attention here, there, everywhere, back to the rut, back to vulnerable podcast, the rut, you know, suddenly it's like it's inconsistent and a little bit confusing, and people don't have patience or time for your shit. That's for you to deal with. So people just want you to be consistent and clear about what you're trying to create in the world. And that cadence is like super important to them.
Yeah. Even with this podcast now, I think we're on episode 11 that's just released. So we've gone past that 90%. Get in there. But we've had, in the first 7 episodes, we had about 1,000 downloads, which is all right. I think that's more than most people get.
It is. Yeah.
So yeah, we kind of whacked out the MVP in pure audio. That's worked. And now we're ramping this up.
Yeah. I mean, I think full credit to him. The thing that Steve really smashed with Diary of a CEO, he was totally correct as well, was investing heavily in the video stuff.
Correct.
You know, I full credit to him. I mean, he was completely spot on. That has absolutely made that podcast, and the fact that he's exceptionally good at interviewing and improves every time and gets great guests and all of these things. But actually it's, it's having video content and doing the whole investment into it properly. And it's interesting with Secret Leaders, it's just not something I'm willing to do. Like I've been asked 1 million times over because I like my entire focus is heights. Yeah. So I'm like 99.9% of my time is on heights, and 0.1% goes into Secret Leaders, and that's interviewing. So, the company is called Kindling Media. It is its own company, it has its own employees, and the agreement I have with them is like, yeah, I am the founder and the shareholder and all of these things, but like, I'm just the host. So you tell me who I'm interviewing, what I should be doing. I don't get involved in guest selection. I don't,
really?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I will occasionally say, hey, I really want to interview this person, go find them. But like, that's it. I don't if anyone inbounds me, I just say, speak to Will or speak to Ruth. I pass it on to my colleagues, and they will do the pre-understanding and pre-decisions on whether or not those people go, the cadence. I'm so, I've designed, it's interesting because, if you have multiple businesses, which I do, because I founded 2 businesses that are still running before Heights.
Mate, your LinkedIn profile is genuinely as long as my arm.
Yeah, well, this is the problem though, right? As in that I am what one would call a multi-hyphenate, which basically means you don't like to be boxed in one thing. You're a creative person, and so you have different interests, and that's very hard for other people to understand. So, actually, it's a really good example for why, I've hit as an interesting point, about 35,000 followers across various social media platforms, and it kind of stops there. And I think there's like an interesting like plateau, or I don't know what necessarily, but I think if I had to guess, it's the fact that I don't just do one thing very clearly well that people know they can follow me for, because I'll talk about neuroscience and mental health and building startups. Those are 3 completely different areas. Plus I run a podcast company, plus I run a community company. So these are very different spaces. I also have built a company on crowdfunding. I bootstrapped a company, and the other one's effectively a charity, right? So I have like multiple different business experiences, 50 plus angel investments that I'm also promoting and sharing all the time. It's confusing. It makes me happy. Like I'm fulfilled, but it's confusing to other people that would come and land on my page and be like, what on earth am I going to follow this person for? People want a clear call to action. What is the consistent thing this person does? And I don't naturally conform to that. Like I could do that, but I don't naturally conform to that. My mind is pretty messy. I am a bit of a messy person in general. That's why I like to do a variety of things. So, you know, to the point, my job is always, okay, I have to figure out what is the thing I'm going to spend almost all of my time doing. Okay, once I figured that out, how am I going to approach those conversations with my co-founders and other employees in other companies? And everything needs to be clear. So no one can like be like, Dan is a dickhead. He, you know, says this shit on social media and doesn't do that stuff. I don't want to be like that. Right. And so it's really interesting. Like I've had a really early opportunity in my life to learn ultimate delegation super quickly, because I do not get involved in how those businesses are run. They have completely empowered CEOs, but at Heights, I'm in control of how it runs. Me and my business partner, Joel, we are in control of the strategy, the direction, the funding, what products we make, all of those things. When it comes to secret leaders, I'm like, treat me as the host. Like, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to do 2 to 4 hours max a week of interviewing. I do it remote. So coming back full circle to our question, I don't want to do the video stuff, etc., because it would require me to travel into a studio, fuck around with calendar, diary invites with guests, which, as you know, is the biggest pain in the ass. I think if I was,
I've got me.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And if I was
You
you
should get one of those, by the way.
What, a nightmare?
No, an EA.
I've got one.
Oh, right.
I've got one. It
so
doesn't
why
make
don't you do this?
Of course,
let her hand over the scheduling.
it doesn't make other people's schedules easier. It doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't make other people's schedules easier. And so for me, I've designed my life currently where the stuff that isn't Heights is minimum friction, maximum enjoyment.
Interesting. How's that evolved over time? Because I've known you for a while, and it's very clear you fucking love what you do.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be doing as much as you do. But I can imagine, and I might be presuming this, that the pressure around all of your interests is intense. How do you deal with that?
With complete clarity. As in, I think stuff starts with, or what's worked really well for me, stuff starts with identifying my personal values. So things that motivate me, that I want to be working towards, that also help me say, this decision doesn't fit with my values, this decision does fit with my values, therefore, you know, I'm up for doing this or I'm not up for doing this. So a really good framework to start with, something I did with my coach, is figure out what my personal values are and therefore where I want to align my time. And then after that, everything comes down to energy, right? I've had burnout, I've had all of the mental health things, like not all of the mental health things, but the main ones. You know, I've had the depression, the anxiety, insomnia,
The fun ones.
So I know what it's like to be mentally sick from wearing yourself out. And a lot of these things come down to too much pressure, too much uncertainty, not enough motivation and personal fulfillment for where you're going. And obviously really poorly managing your energy. And look, to break that down, burnout, what is that? That's poorly managing your energy. Depression, what is that? So many things, but in my case, it's a lack of purpose, a lack of a sense of going in the right direction, feeling fulfilled every day, feeling like you're making a contribution. Anxiety, what is that? It's being stressed all the time, really concerned about the future, really unclear about where you're making an impact. And then insomnia, what is that? Again, comes back to energy. It's mismanaging your energy, mismanaging your diet, mismanaging your body. You do that, your brain sets off alarm signs that your house is on fire. And unless you put it out and start feeding yourself and hydrating yourself and giving yourself the right amount of sleep, it all just goes to shit. So when I think about like the 4 major mental health problems I've had, I can then sort of work back on diagnosing, okay, well, how do I manage these things? And I think a lot of this stuff starts with managing your energy. So if I am thinking about, okay, what does that mean? It means not working 24/7, which means if I've got 3 businesses, I need to think about how much time I can literally apportion to each one, which means that, okay, Heights is my full-time job. So with Secret Leaders, I need to make sure that that is like I say, 2 to 4 hours max, no travel time, no faffing, no anything else. It's going to be, if it's 2 hours, it's 1 interview. If it's 4 hours, it's 2 interviews. That is done Monday and Tuesday afternoon only. So I arrange my whole entire calendar around that. And sometimes if it's American guests, I'll do Monday night or Tuesday night. But I know that those things are happening those days and I don't do anything ever otherwise. And then with Foundrs, you know, this is like once a month board meeting stuff and, you know, and a lot of work. I think the thing that, and a lot of work on weekends occasionally, or it's actually going away for a weekend and having a great time.
I'm excited for the next one.
Yeah. The reality is I spent years of hard grind getting to that point, and I started those businesses before Heights. So, you know, they got to meaningful enough revenue, whereas bootstrapped companies where you can hire people and have a succession plan. And I think this is a really important part, right? And if you have a succession plan and you move yourself away from the decision-making capabilities, amazing opportunity to work on your ego. Because whatever someone else...
Interesting.
Yeah, because whatever your empowered CEO tells you they're doing that you don't agree with is a fascinating experience. Because you're like, I don't agree with the strategy. However, I have literally said that I'm going to empower this person and I don't want to spend the time doing the strategy myself. So what does that leave me with? It leaves me with trusting you. But my ego tells me that you might be wrong and that I might be right, but I made this decision, so I have to stick to that decision.
How difficult is that internal process?
Well, yeah, difficult because I'm an opinionated person who's really passionate. And you know what? Again, having good co-founders is really helpful. So, and also, you know, I've worked really hard at trying to make sure people are rewarded when they give me negative, constructive, or strong feedback and not punished, so that they know that they can challenge me and they know that they can properly push back and put me in my place.
What's an example of a reward?
Well, as in like, you know, literally saying, thank you so much, you're completely right.
Okay.
I'm not giving them dog biscuits. Then maybe I should consider that.
You've got cats, mate. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not giving them a bonus or something for telling me, but I guess the entire point is one of the most common traits that you'll find from, you know, younger or more inexperienced employees talking to their boss is they're scared to give them a hard time or tell them that they don't agree and all of this kind of stuff, because it's you're told in school to respect, you know, your seniors and like all of this stuff. There's just the society is set up for that kind of psychology. So the opportunity is enabling people to give you really clear feedback and making sure that they know that you respect it and you enjoy it and it's helpful. And also having really good co-founders who will put me in my place. So I had, you know, a bollocking from one of my co-founders, from Rob, who runs Foundrs with me, because I was basically using him to just complain about, I don't think this is quite going the way that we want, and this is going a bit slower, and I think this could be better, and all of this kind of stuff. And, you know, he gave me bollocking. It's like, you know, at the end of the day, like, we've got a CEO, we've empowered them, and like, we're not like the co-founders in control anymore. So like, these are all decisions that we've made, and the job to be done here is chatting to AJ, who's our CEO, and discussing these things directly, not complaining. It's like a total waste of time. And he gave me such a straightforward talking to, and I really appreciated it, right? Because I was like, God, it's true. But you know, like everyone going through a personal growth journey, which that is, I was struggling to let go of something. I think it's quite a normal thing. I was used to being in control, saying this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it. And suddenly I wasn't. And I found that really difficult, and I was clinging on, and I was given a strong talking to about how unprofessional that actually is and how demotivating that probably would be as well. These all provide amazing growth opportunities, right? At the end of the day, if you want to scale something, you have to learn how to delegate super well. And it isn't natural. It just isn't.
Hey, can I ask a massive favour? Can you subscribe to this podcast right now, if you haven't already? Your subscribes, your sharing, your liking, your commenting all over social media is increasing our reach, and it's meaning that founders out there know it's okay to talk about their mental health. Thank you.
Vulnerable, a Foundrs Taboo podcast, has been created to raise awareness on the highs, lows, and taboos of the founder journey, to amplify the raw and unfiltered stories of founders, and to remind those listening that they are not alone. Foundrs Taboo is a movement dedicated to improving access to support for founders' mental health and well-being, in order to build a healthier startup ecosystem as a whole. Entrepreneurship is undeniably hard, but it doesn't have to cause hardship. We know that entrepreneurship is often lonely, but it doesn't have to be. Our support includes a safe space to take off the mask and interact with fellow founders in a free online community. You can access hundreds of psychologically informed resources and exercises to build up your mental health literacy. You can source and connect with startup and well-being professionals. You can participate in live support sessions, attend retreats, and much more. We want to promote mindfulness in entrepreneurship, harmony rather than conflict between health and building a business. And this all starts with speaking out and breaking some taboos. Join the movement. All founders are welcome. Follow us on LinkedIn to keep up to date and get involved.
You've recently been through a funding round with Heights, of which we participated in.
Thank you.
No problem. One thing that I know investors get a bit withdrawn over is when the founders have got multiple interests going on. Did you encounter any pushback when it came to your multiple interests?
So I didn't.
Interesting.
So I didn't, but I have in the past.
Right.
But I didn't because all things are very, like these three businesses, they kind of help each other realistically.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs are a big part of the Heights audience and customer set. Not the biggest, but they're a considerable part of it. Founders is about helping entrepreneurs, and Secret Leaders is also about helping entrepreneurs. They're kind of all, they're all within a similar subset. But then the other thing is I'm very clearly all in on Heights. And, I say this verbally to anyone that will listen, including in all three companies. The question you asked me earlier, I think it's really important just to have clarity. Like, how do you make sure that people are aligned and don't feel let down and stuff? Like, they have to know when you're available, and they have to know that you have the energy to give this your full attention and your best work. And you throw a baby into the mix, which I'm currently going through, your energy is already going to be disrupted. So your discipline for where you spend your time and the clarity and communication about where you're spending your time, that stuff has to be, it has to be honest. It has to be thoughtful. Trying to remember, like, there's a Gandhi quote that's something like, when, like, what you say, what you do, what you think, what you say, and what you do are completely aligned. That's essentially like living your truest self. And I think that's exactly true. Like, most people will think one thing and do another, say one thing and do another, etc. So I think the stuff just, trying to be honest and trying to set up these systems that can work where people have buy-in and understand what they're going to get from you. I think that's really, really, really important.
As you know, I followed your story for a long, long time. And if you don't want to answer this question, let me know, but you probably will. I've always wondered, with your story, the impact your father's death had on your mental health, but also how you've then shifted your focus in your life. What impact did that have on you?
Yeah. I mean, my dad's been dead for 10 years now. So, in my mind, I lost him quite young. I was 25. He was my best friend, and he was a very inspiring person. He was a business owner because he wouldn't say entrepreneur. And I guess, there's a lot of interesting stuff on the positioning around what an entrepreneur is, but, ultimately, I think for him, A, it sounded a bit wanky. Just basically is. And B, he ran the same business his whole life. Right. He started a family business and he ran it for his whole life, like 50 years. It was in fashion manufacturing.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I had zero interest. I grew up with, it's interesting seeing, like, being part of a family business, like growing up and stuff. It was my uncle, my dad, and my grandpa. And that, to me, growing up seemed like a very small world. My mum, for example, is a much more adventurous person. She was a European tour guide. She spoke 5 languages. She's very much an adventurer. And, if I want to go on a fun holiday, I would go with my mum in half term and we'd have a great time. Whereas my dad would be like, we're going to, some standard place that English people go, Mallorca or Marbella, or in a hotel and sitting there for a week. And I'd be like with my mum, going mad, like with boredom. So my dad liked the simple things. And I definitely gravitated more to like the adventure. When it comes to, my dad's business, he was very sick. I mean, he was unhealthy. So this is where my interest in health came.
Right.
So he was very, very unhealthy, but he also had, physical disabilities. He was blind as well. So, he had a real challenge. And it was like, that's one of the reasons why he was so inspiring, right? As in seeing someone go to work every day without fail, who was blind, who was running a really
How long had he been blind
company. Well, it's a degenerative disease. So basically from about my age now, from mid-30s, it started to decline.
Wow.
And he, so really by the time he was in his mid-40s, he was pretty much blind. That's the age I was growing up.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah. So and as a kid, I only really ever knew my dad as blind. He lived the majority of his life with sight. I suppose he died at 67. So, he lived half his life with sight or something. But my experience of my dad was growing up with someone who was blind. So my father-son relationship was very different to other people's father-son relationship. If I just always remember, as a 6-year-old, if we want to go to the shop, it was as much me taking my dad as the other way around. As a 6-year-old, I had to be very aware of, this is a road, this is a car, this could hurt us. So it was me leading my dad in those scenarios, but obviously he's my guardian and, much wiser and older and all of this stuff. So it was a really interesting symbiotic relationship, which bonds you incredibly closely. So it's always been like that with my dad. Like, we've been best friends, do everything together. He's also really funny and fun. And, my mum would say no to everything and my dad would say yes to most things. So, I had him wrapped around my little finger, whereas mum was the disciplinarian. So, there's all those relational, circumstances that go on and like how you think about your parents. But, his business also made him really sick. He had multiple stresses. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, there were tons of economic stresses in the economy anyway. And so my dad felt those, went out of business a couple of times. We had, lost our house. Like, there was these things that caused a lot of stress in his life. And so that was difficult to watch. And he basically got heart attacks and ended up, being told that he was going to die multiple times in my life in hospital. From the age of 6, wow. I was regularly in hospital with my mum, speaking to doctors, hearing about how dad might not make it, and then he would. So you have this really interesting experience of being very aware and close to death, often, with coming through the other side. And what that did to me was, sadly, when I was 18, my mum got cancer. She got ovarian cancer and stage 4. So, very likely to die. She's the only survivor in her group. And she had a remission case 4 years ago, came back like 10 years later after she'd recovered the first time. And she recovered again. It's obviously a lot on your body.
Jesus.
But she's recovered twice, which is incredible and extremely rare. As I'm sure you're aware with stage 4 cancer, it's basically game over. So it's just extremely rare. But what happened was, and I've reflected on this a lot and apologized to my mum, etc. I grew up with 10 years of not apathy, but you have to understand what happens to a developing young mind who is being told dad's going to die, then he doesn't die, then told he's going to die, then he doesn't die, and on repeat. What basically happens is you become a bit apathetic to it all. I suppose you could go two ways, right? You could become a massive hypochondriac and become really scared of health and all this stuff. Or you could take the approach of like, everyone tells me my dad's going to die the entire time and he never does. So like, I'm not going to panic. It's basically, so I became very icy cold to the emotional side of death. I don't react very well with hypochondriacs.
Interesting.
I don't react very well with people who have massive health anxiety, which is tricky because my wife has very bad health anxiety. So I'm always, I'm a very compassionate person. I'm very caring, but if it comes to health stuff, I just can't help but roll my eyes. I don't mean it. I'm very aware that people have like legitimate health concerns, but like in my experience of people with health anxieties, a lot of it doesn't come to fruition. Like my wife told me she had COVID about 400 times over the last 2 years and she had it once. Which was like right at the end. So like it's a perfect example, right? And I'm just like always rational of Occam's razor in every scenario, which is like, you probably don't. And the most rational answer is almost always the correct answer.
And do you think that impacted your own ability to reason with your mental health issues? Because you've talked a lot there about other people and your reaction to other people's health concerns, but with yourself, has that impacted that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Like I've had health issues that have gone too far as well. And so yeah, I fall into the stereotype for sure of man.
Being a bloke, yeah.
Yeah, I really do. Like whatever the furthest from a hypochondriac is what I am. And that is really not a good place to be either, because your health is extremely important. And I have ignored things to a really bad place. Like I've ended up in hospital nil by mouth for a week with something called a pneumomediastinum, which is a total medical phenomenon to the point where they were calling in people all week to just study and look at me and point at me and be like, what the fuck is going on here? But basically I tore a hole in my throat from having a coughing fit from ignoring gut issues for so long, for years and years and years. And I just ignored it all and was like, it's fine. It's just a thing. And in the end, like, actually, no, that thing tore a hole in my throat and I had to go to speech therapy.
Story. This was at a festival, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But from having a coughing fit. Fortunately, a day festival, unfortunately in London. So fortunately, I was right next to it. Like it was the Royal London Hospital. So that's where I was able to go. But what happened was, I had a coughing fit and that tore a hole in my throat. My throat lining was very thin because of all the acid reflux from the amount of times I'd thrown up from having gut issues over multiple years. And this hole meant that when I was breathing in, I kind of felt okay other than having a cough, but I was breathing oxygen in. It was going around my head and my brain, not into my lungs like properly. And so my head was literally physically getting big. So my friends were the ones who looked at me and were like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And I'm like, I don't know, nothing's wrong with me. I've got a cough. And they're like, no, your head is enormous. And I was like, I don't get the joke. And they're like, your head is like twice the size of a normal head. What is going on? Jeez. And like, we were with a doctor and she panicked and was like, we're going to hospital right now. And I walked into A&E and like, East London, Whitechapel, everyone is there for knife or gunshots, basically. It was mad Saturday night, proper hardcore, blood everywhere, all this kind of stuff. They take one look at me and they're like, this guy's next.
Wow.
I didn't queue or anything. They took me straight in and then I was just under observation for like a week and, they had to repair my throat and all this kind of stuff. Well, basically, the body does heal itself. So I basically had to be nil by mouth on oxygen and on opium, which I strongly recommend. It was delicious. But I was just on morphine essentially for like a week whilst they prodded and protected me. And I just wasn't able to use my own bodily functions until it had repaired. And then I had to do speech therapy and the whole thing. This is why I have a crackly throat. Like I sound like I am a smoker, but I'm not. This is just a downstream consequence of ignoring your health for so long. So I am a man to the nth degree, and that is a bad thing. And then when it comes to mental health, I mean, it's an interesting one because I don't know that I would relate the hypochondriac side of things, this experience with my dad to the mental health stuff. Because I think that the mental health stuff actually just has more about being a man, to be honest. Like, it's a very broad statement, right? But okay, just to play it out here. The burnout, that's just entrepreneurship and inexperience and immaturity, right? And a lack of self-awareness and all of the things. It's not anything to do with being a man or a woman. I think that just comes with being young, being passionate, not being very smart about what your body can literally take and how much energy you can expel before that happens. So that, I think, I want people to avoid burnout massively, but I also know if you're mega passionate and all of this stuff, chances are you might have to learn the hard way, because it's just what people end up doing by mistake. It's just a reality. So whilst I don't want that to be the case, because I've been the person, I know that someone telling me that I'm heading for burnout when my company's success depends on the minutes and hours I put in. You couldn't have at the time told me your experience and stopped me from doing more. It's just that simple, because I had everything at stake. And when you have everything at stake, you desperately want to make it work and get through the other side. It's just a natural human behavior. So I'm not sure about that. Depression, well, that was completely related to my dad passing away. So that, in my experience with depression, it was two things. One, I was working in advertising and I wasn't living the life I wanted, and I didn't really want to be doing what I was doing. My dad had, been an entrepreneur, a business owner, whatever, and had asked me if I wanted to work in a business, and I'd said no. And, there's probably parts of feelings of guilt. That's where the business basically ended and there was no continuity. There's that side of it. There's also the side of it of I was massively unfulfilled doing advertising. I really didn't want to be doing that. And I knew that I did want to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know what I wanted to do.
So he had actually asked you to come into his business.
Yeah, over multiple years, right? As in, I think it's natural in all parents that have a family business, they want you to do that. And in the summers, I used to work in the warehouse. I had a warehouse in Tottenham, and, that's where I used to work. I would drive a forklift truck and do the actual work. So I can do, which is great because I actually learned, the back office stuff, like how hard labor actually happens. That's what I would do in the summers. So, I learned how to work and hard graft properly warehouse work in my teens. And then, probably illegally, but no one can sue a dead man, so hey. And I and then that's what he wanted me to do, but I didn't want to do it, and I wanted to find my own way. So I went into advertising because it wasn't fashion and I was a creative person, and that's what I thought I wanted to do. And I did enjoy it for a while, but then I always wanted to do something more. So that loss of purpose and not knowing where I was going, plus what happened to my dad, just sunk me into like a deep depression. And in my experience with depression, it basically just takes time.
It does.
There's not really a solution to depression. Obviously for a lot of people, antidepressants have actually really helped my mum when she was depressed with my dad. And so, I don't want to shit on antidepressants. I just personally really just try to avoid all pharmaceuticals always, forever, whatever they are. When I had insomnia, I was given sleeping pills. I refused to take them. When I had depression, I was given antidepressants. I refused to take them. That's not to say that I don't think that they have a place in society, because I've seen them work for my mum. It's just that I want to find a different way. And so
Why do you want to find a different way?
I don't want to be, if I don't need to be, I don't want to be chemically reliant on something like that. Right.
That makes sense.
I also recently saw Dope Sick. I don't know if you've seen it.
No.
But, oh my God. It's just tragic. It's just tragic. The thing is, the stuff changes the shape of the chemistry of your brain. It just does, and turns you into an addict. And it's very hard to get off this stuff. Very hard. And if you do...
I'm on a small dose of sertraline every day, and it's in many cases saved my life.
Yeah.
But equally, I don't like the fact that if I don't take it for a day, I get headaches and I get withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah, that's what my mum says.
And I'm like, okay, then I've got the anxiety at the end of the month where I've got like 4 pills left or 3 pills left and Boots isn't open. And I'm like, okay, the trade-off here is I'm going to feel really shit for a day and have need to be in bed. And so how do you... Yeah, it's really difficult to get off them.
Really hard.
Because also you're like, well, what's the other side?
Yeah. But this is the thing. I think it's very important when you talk about mental health stuff, to be honest. And my honest approach is I always chose the hard path of avoiding it. Always. Whether that's right or wrong for me, I suffered for way too long as well, right? As in, I know from the experience of my mum how quickly that helped her. I know that it serves a real purpose. And I decided personally to just suffer for considerably longer to find a different way. The reality is it helps lots of people. And I think it's really important when talking about mental health and supplements or pharmaceuticals or whatever it is, that you don't shit on something for everyone. Like, the reality is once you've made the choice to go on them, it's hard to come off. And the other choice is, okay, so do I just choose to spend way more time like this until I don't? And that was my choice, right? I spent way more time depressed than I could have, than I maybe needed to.
How does that make you feel in retrospect?
I mean, I think I made the right choice, but also I can be very stubborn with myself.
I can tell.
Yeah. So, I always believed, and there's two things as well. My depression was not as bad as my insomnia.
Interesting.
So with depression, I always thought I would get out of it. So with my depression, I believed that it was potentially part of life. But also, it does help having a rational reason why you're depressed. Like, my father passing away is a rational reason for being depressed. I think having a lack of purpose and a lack of direction, not knowing what you're going to do, is also a very logical reason why you're depressed. Like, a lot of people want a good reason to get out of bed and a good joie de vivre or a thing. That's why, sadly, a lot of people choose to have kids like that. And that is not a healthy decision.
So
if
true.
you can't be happy for yourself, how can you be happy for your kids? However, it does actually work for a lot of people, right? Because they do pour their lives and hearts and souls into their kids. And that actually brings so much joy and happiness and a sense of purpose that the depression passes that way. So there are many ways of solving this. And obviously there are also other factors around depression that aren't just based on the two experiences I have, right? It's a complicated problem. However, in my personal experience, those are my two triggers. Both felt like perfectly rational things to live through. So I also believed that whether it's 6 months or a year or 5 years, I won't always be depressed. I truly believed that. And I think
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
And one of the, when you talk about depression as not, there's something within your subconscious actually that isn't quite right. So I, about 2 months ago, started feeling going down into this hole, culminating in about 3 weeks ago. About a month, 3 weeks ago, I was on the sofa with Abby, just in tears. I was like, I don't know why, but I've just been in this hole. Don't want to see anybody. Don't want to do anything. I've got no energy. I don't even want to run my company. And I don't know where to go. Called up my therapist. 5 hours of sessions later, he said to me, look, for whatever reason, you seem to be more susceptible than others to depressive episodes, right? And that could be bipolar, which is undiagnosed at the moment, but we are looking at diagnosis there. Or there's a chemical imbalance in the brain, but it's triggered when you subconsciously don't feel like you're on the right path. And so I had to take this step back and basically push everything in my diary other than this podcast and the company and really explore why am I not quite fulfilled. And the reason was I was doing too much and I didn't feel like I was appropriating enough time to set various things, fundraising, etc., just doing too much. And I completely resonate with depression being, for some whatever rhyme or reason, being a lack of direction or purpose or fulfillment in what you're doing in that present state, that triggers a much wider emotional, physical reaction with you for a long period of time. I'm now feeling better, but Jesus, when you think about that, actually the importance of purpose in your life is so big.
And I think, something else that people don't think about when they're thinking about mental health, a lot of people think they either have bad mental health or they don't. And not enough people actually realize that, you sadly might just not have yet had your bad experience with mental health. You're a human being, you have a long life, things happen to you, things happen for you, and you make your own decisions, and some of them you'll live to regret. And not everyone is able to develop the rock hard, iron, stoic mindset around everything as well. And so for a lot of people, they just haven't yet experienced extremes in their mental health. And just because you haven't yet had that doesn't mean that you won't. This is why, we talk about brain care so much at Heights, why we think that, I truly believe that a lot of mental health issues that can come up in your life are preventable. And they're preventable with certain behaviors. Nutrition is just one of those behaviors. But the thing is, if you flip the coin and say the other side, right? If you have poor nutrition and poor hydration and poor sleep and, no sense of purpose and no idea where you're going, your likelihood of developing mental health illnesses is exponentially high. It's basically guaranteed to happen. So then flip it and say, okay, I've got good inputs on nutrition and hydration and sleep. What is the opposite of that statement? What is the opposite to be true? Well, I'm taking care of myself. I'm far less likely to experience these extremes in my mental health. It's quite simply, it's a scientific fact, but it's also just quite logical when you play these things out. It's a bit like saying, if I eat like shit and I don't drink well and I drink loads of alcohol and I don't really take care of myself, I don't reckon I'll get fat or unhealthy. It'll be okay. And it's like, no, mate, that's not true. Maybe true for a month, but compound that over 5 years, you're going to end up fat, unhealthy, and probably with quite a low sense of self-esteem. Why? Because of your choices 5 years ago, your daily inputs are poor choices, and very few people, obviously some, but very few people have the genetic lottery win of being able to counteract all of that with an insanely high metabolism and all the rest. Most people will follow the same rate of aging and decline if they don't put proper fuel into their body. And that can be across those 3 different dimensions, right? So if you're not resting properly, if you're not eating well, getting the right nutrition, and you're not getting enough of your water and less alcohol and dehydrants, if you're not practicing those things, your life either goes like this or like that. Very slowly. It's not noticeable on a day-to-day, but one day you wake up and realize, shit. And then people do the extremes, right? I watched my dad do this with his health. My dad was always on the next massive mega diet. And it's like, no, Dad, the reality is the extreme mega diet, because you just spent another year eating and drinking whatever you wanted, is not the way. The way is change the daily behaviors. So you're not sitting there eating cottage cheese and lettuce every single lunch, which you hate. You just eat a little bit less and you drink a bit less and you get a little bit healthier every single day. And over a year, you suddenly go from being fat and unhealthy and sad about your position to healthier, in a better position, feeling better, etc., without having to experience any of the extremes of hating your day-to-day and the things that you're eating. So, I don't think any of this stuff is rocket science. I think a lot of it is common sense. And, how we think about our physical bodies like that is very similar to how we should think about our mental health. Now, where there are discrepancies in this argument is obviously there are genetic predispositions to mental health illnesses. There's, my uncle, for example, is a schizophrenic. He is a committed schizophrenic. So my mum has had to look after him her whole life. He's currently in hospital right now with having had another psychotic episode. I know, I've seen it. I know that there are exceptions to this rule, that you can be genetically predisposed to extreme mental health conditions. Bipolar is another one. There are a variety. Everything that is being said here, there's always a caveat and there is always nuance. However, most people that experience mental health issues will fall down for the same kind of things. And a lot of those circumstances you can turn around. You just have to believe that you can turn them around, and your lifestyle is usually the things that will dictate whether they'll improve over time.
You are very open about you build Heights in public, right? Which I love and adore you and the company for, because I think it's fantastic for other entrepreneurs to watch it grow and build brain care as a category. But and I know you're open about the challenges as well, but How difficult has building Heights been?
Well, what's the question? How difficult has building Heights been, or how difficult has it been building it in public?
How the former.
Okay. Building Heights hasn't been like the biggest challenge, if I'm totally honest, because I failed before. So building Grabble, my last company, was extremely hard because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to hire people. I didn't know how to motivate people other than with money, carrot stick shit. And I didn't know the importance of instilling values in a culture and all of these things that I was very green on. And the company went through hyper growth too quickly, meaning I didn't really have the resolve or opportunity to skill up and scale up my own ability to learn at the pace that Grabble needed, and it ended up failing. The benefit of that is 4 years of building a company that was a rocket ship for a period of time and then totally imploded is I learned so much about the things that matter and how to start properly. So, at Heights, the job is understanding, how to do one thing well. And until you do one thing well, we don't do a second thing well. And this is usually where most entrepreneurs make a big mistake. I think what's really unusual about Heights is we've been 2.5 years in the market. And this is still our one product that you can buy. And that is boring. It's boring for us. It's boring for customers. It's boring for like anyone and everyone, right? It's boring to have one product. However, why? Because there's a lot that you can do to perfect a product, and customers give you feedback, and you can make something truly great with focus. So, as we're talking, this Sunday is a 200th episode of my newsletter. So that means 200 episodes ago, which is almost 4 years, I sat down to start writing about mental health. Consistently every single Sunday have sent a newsletter in under 3 minutes about what science says you can do to take care of your brain. Essentially anything to do with mental health. One thing, super clear, rewritten in plain English, often from a science journal. And 200 episodes later, really proud of that consistency because it keeps me learning and keeps me sharing. And that's always been part of the journey. However,
congrats, by the way, because most people don't get past 10.
Right. And consistency is always, and it's hard, right? Because actually sometimes you have to get to episode 1,000 before anyone actually starts caring about you. So like full credit to people that keep going, but like actually outlasting your competition tends to be the winning strategy. So in many ways, the two tricks to success are managing your energy and not getting bored. Like caring enough about the thing you do with enough passion that you're intrinsically motivated to carry on. Because if you get bored and you stop, you lose. And if you run out of energy and get burnt out and you can't carry on, you lose.
So with that, those kind of pillars in mind, you've not released, obviously you've iterated on this product, I'm sure many, many times.
Yeah, five times that's been upgraded and changed.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So how have you kept your internal team, your team motivated to keep rebuilding this? Because you're right, like it can be boring.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. The team's probably over-indexed slightly on data nerds as opposed to creatives.
Interesting.
And we've rectified that a bit in the last 6 months by hiring more creative people.
Was that intentional?
It was originally, yeah. Yeah, it was. And then we kind of got to a point where we were like, oh, actually, you know what? We're such an analytical team. We're probably lacking in ideas at this point. And we have rectified that a bit now. Like we've actually, we've got a brand team. We've, hired a creative director. Like we now talk about campaigns and stories and all that kind of stuff. Whereas previously it was kind of just me. Now we have like a bunch of people in the team who bring this to life and do talk about it. But I think the answer to your question is, but the benefit of having a bunch of data nerds is there's always efficiencies to be had. There's always improvements to make. There's always challenges on how you outthink the competition or out-communicate this. And, data is at the heart of, your ability to actually improve and make a difference. So that's kind of the answer to that question. I think as you grow, obviously, you do need some diversity of product line and, there's only so much that you can perfect something to. I did a post on LinkedIn this morning actually about our very first attempt, 3.5 years ago. We'd already started the newsletter. The reason we started the newsletter was Joel and I knew that we wanted to build a brain care company. We didn't call it brain care at the time. We was like mental health and brain health. We were like that area, super interesting to us. We know we want to create a physical product because no one thinks about nutrition or hydration or any of these inputs as impacting their brain. So we know there's a big opportunity by following the science, but also by people having positive outcomes. So we're like, this will be a surprise to people. There'll be skeptics, but it'll be a surprise and it'll work and people will feel great and then happy days for us.
Why did Joel want to build the company?
Oh, Joel had really bad gut issues for a couple of years.
And without giving the game away, that surely is your next.
Yeah. Our next product's a probiotic, and we've been developing that probiotic for 2.5 years. So since we started, and this is the other part on focus and team, right? So we have had an NPD team. I mean, Joel is responsible for the product. Yeah. So ultimately, but so is our chief science officer, Tara, and our head of nutrition, Sophie, is one of the UK's top gut experts. Wow. So, and she helped us design this product too. So
I'm super excited for that.
Yeah. And actually, it's really interesting. The probiotic, I know we're meandering a bit, but the probiotic has unbelievable clinical evidence on the strains for supporting serotonin creation in the gut and mental health. So most probiotics impact the gut, and that's great. And they use these cultures and strains, etc. Ours specifically, this is why brain care, ours specifically has evidence around improving your mental health. So it's a super unique and amazing product.
When's this coming out?
Well, February to the public, but to Heights customers next month. Really? So Heights customers will get to...
I haven't seen that anywhere. Is that an exclusive?
Yes. So we are, if you're a Heights customer, we've invited people to our product testing community. Yeah. So you might have missed that. So
I have missed that. Please do get me on that because we're currently, Abby and I are going through tests at the moment around our gut because we've noticed that it's fucked basically. Yeah. A lot of people's. Yeah, really fucked. We don't know whether we've got intolerances, etc., etc. So we're going to do that, but equally, please do because I think we're both. She takes probiotics every day, but. It's a bit up and down with them. We haven't really found one that's been affordable because you've got Synprove, which is like ridiculously expensive.
Like 100 quid, isn't it?
It's like 160 quid.
Yeah, it's very expensive.
Very expensive.
And the format is bad. I mean, that's what Joel was taking though. The thing is, it's very good Synprove.
Yeah.
Ours is as good as Synprove, but in capsule form. Yeah. And
hopefully
with a
half
mental
the
health.
price.
But with definitely. Yeah. But with a mental health twist.
Yeah, nice.
But anyway, so just to give you like an idea then on process. So we started that newsletter, like I say, 200 weeks ago. And then we're like, okay, whilst we're building an audience, now we have time to figure out what product to make. And so our first product that we were trying to make was a hydration product. And it was a disaster. Like we spent 3 or 4 months trying to make something that never got to market because it just tasted like shit. And it's very hard to make a good product. But if you're making a hydration product, it has to serve the function of working and tasting good, which is very hard to pull off. So we ended up canning that, and then we started moving into like different iterations for what eventually became Heights. But then, like I say, once Heights came to market, so the initial product development was obviously then in that 1.5 years until we launched the probiotic. And we started researching that. I say 2.5 years ago. It's blown our mind how long it's taken to create that product. It's just a much more volatile, complicated, very specific product. To give you an idea, we had got to a point of being able to make clinical claims around different, clinical statements around different claims and benefits and use cases. And then we wanted to put it in certain packaging, and just putting it in different packaging means you need to do the tests again. Fuck. It's just so volatile. So like even its exposure to air changes your ability to say with confidence these things work or don't. So it's just been a really interesting experiment and experience doing it, but it's just taken an outrageously long time. But again, what does that mean? It means that we've spent, there's been a team that spent about 2.5 years razor sharp focused on bringing one new product out, not 10 new products, one new product out. And so the way that we think about building Heights, the way that we think that we're different to everyone else is, if you're going to take one product for X use case, you should choose Heights. Why? Because we literally research and spend all of our time doing that thing. And if it isn't the best, we make it better all the time. We'll just keep iterating on that one thing. So which probiotic? Well, we spend the time and, really raise a sharp focus on that one thing. Our braincare supplement, the smart supplement, which covers, your general nutritional needs for better brain health. Again, you can find all of these things in your diet, and you should. Clues in the name, it's a supplement. So if you're
relying on this, you're fucked, basically.
No, not if you're relying on this, you're fucked. I was going to say, if you're perfect and you eat at home and you cook really well and you do all of those things well, you don't need supplements.
Interesting.
If you're perfect, but most of us aren't. But some people are.
Nobody's perfect.
Some people are, but what's interesting is nutritionists and dietitians still take Heights. And they know what to cook and eat, right? So the point is, it's your insurance policy. You don't mess around with something as important as your brain function. You're using it for every other decision today. You want to get rich, you need your brain. You want to live a long life, you need your brain. You want to avoid cognitive decline, you need your brain. All of these things, you want to have energy, you want to sleep well, you need your brain. You want to be a present father, mother, you need your brain. Why mess around? Why be no, I'm good. So anyway, that's the logic, right? And why choose us? Because we spend all of our time super focused on iteration. So coming back to your question, has building Heights been hard? It's been challenging, but it hasn't been as hard. And the reason it hasn't been as hard is because we've had a clearer idea of, of the things that matter. And the things that matter are team. So picking the right people, giving them a clear direction, and instilling good company values. And I think if you do those things, people turn up to work every day really motivated and excited to do great things, and the rest kind of works itself out.
What have been your biggest fuck-ups building Heights?
I mean, it's hard to say it's a big fuck-up, but it was painful. Is just we messed around with, are we remote or are we not, for about a year and a half, because we launched January the 6th, 2020. So we launched in an office in Soho. But the first employees we ever hired didn't join till March, which when the pandemic happened. So we did some interviews in the office and we hired them, but they didn't start till March. So pretty much day one lockdown, and we never met them. As in, we did meet those ones, but they never came into the office. And then the next few months is we're paying for an office. Are we remote? Are we not? What culture are we building? And that indecision, basically what a lot of people do anyway, which is our decision was we're hybrid, limited us. It limited us because it meant that we were trying to understand how to build a good hybrid culture. I'm not negative on hybrid culture, but I do think what's really important is being very clear what you are. And because we were kind of default hybrid because we hadn't really decided, we were, accidentally creating a bad culture, or not as good a culture as we possibly could have been by deciding that we're an office culture or a remote culture. So good examples are, they're unintended things. There are a bunch of people going into the office to work, but then other people that live in other countries because we've hired them remotely, feel excluded. So you get an accidental clique or accidental misinformation that's not landing all the way through the team because the structures aren't set up properly. So it's stuff like that is totally innocent in the face of it, but actually, practically speaking, just causes more fragmented lines of communication and less clarity across the team, and therefore less connection. So going all in on remote, which is something, like I say, we delayed that decision so long. We went through all of the bloody lockdowns so many times paying for offices. Because we're we'll come back, and then it's another month you're paying for this thing, and it's just such a waste. So we've only been fully remote, I think, for basically a year. And I think it's just been an exponentially positive decision because we understand what we are and how hard it is to build a remote company. And therefore we put all of our effort and energy as a team into building a great remote culture, which is a very different culture. It means how we communicate is different, but the other benefits are, I've got an amazing colleague who lives in Bangkok. I've got 2 amazing colleagues that live in America, 3 that live in Turkey, 1 lives in France. You've got people all over the world now. ones in South Africa that joined this week. It just doesn't matter. Some in Nigeria as well. It just doesn't matter where people are. You put job ads out and you interview whoever is the best. And then the challenge with time zones becomes, okay, how do great remote cultures work? You start to learn how to work asynchronously. So it's writing documents, it's commenting on documents, it's less meetings, and it's more just like catching up on the stuff you said you were going to do, but by writing it down or doing looms, whatever the thing is. And I think it's really exciting.
So that's fascinating, because I've struggled with being fully remote now. We've been fully remote for 18 months, and I'll just get really lonely.
Yeah, and that's a massive problem. It is.
How do you tackle that?
It's a great question. I interestingly have learned that I actually quite like my own space. I don't get my own space that often. I'm married with a baby.
I want to come on to that, by the way.
Yeah, so I actually think I really value having my own space and time to do stuff. But, the reality is like half our team live in London. Well, or whatever, a third of our team live in London. So, still go out for like coffees or whatever. It's just try not to do like big things with half the team and not with the other half of the team. So, I do think that's important, and I don't want to my answer is very specific to the fact that actually a bunch of our team live in London because that's where we started. Started with an office-based company, so naturally a whole bunch of our colleagues are in London. So it isn't too bad for me, but I massively relate. I really understand that is definitely a problem for remote companies.
I don't really know how to solve it either. It's only myself and my co-founder who are in London. Everybody else is US, Nigeria, Ethiopia, South Africa. And that kind of contact time.
Yeah, I mean, we do a retreat every 6 months.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. We do a week together.
Yeah. Nice.
Our next one's coming up in 2.5 weeks.
Where are you going?
The last one was in Somerset. This one's in a place called Hitchin. It's only an hour outside London, but it's actually because we've got so many flights internationally now that we wanted to make it easy for people. They get into King's Cross and it's an hour or so from King's Cross, and then they're not spending stupid amounts of time traveling. So
and I presume you pay for their travel, etc.
Yeah, of course. And this is the thing. People think that remote companies, it's like, well, it's cheaper. Arguably, it's more expensive because we do these retreats twice a year. You're paying for people also if they want to. We do like Hubble, so we let people go and choose their own office spaces to work in whenever they want to or need to collaborate to get out of the house. Some people, younger people, also might be living in a flat share with people, right? And actually working every day in your flat is super hard and distracting and impractical for you to get your work done, in which case we want to enable them to make that easier.
A lot to learn there, I think. I don't think we're doing it right at all.
It's hard. It's very hard to get right.
Yeah. It's my first time doing it. It's your first time doing it, but I think we haven't been, and this is me getting vulnerable here, we haven't been, we've got a lot of things wrong with culture. I think we've been so busy building that we've kind of forgotten about it.
Yeah.
And that has come to the detriment of my mental health. I think it's come to the detriment of our pace of shipping product. And it's a real headache.
It's hard because you don't have them, building a remote company, you don't have the moments of serendipity, the water cooler moment, right? So then you have to decide, how am I going to create this? How do we architect this instead? So at Heights, what we do is we have, we have sessions where everyone works with their Zoom cameras on. So we all get together Monday, Wednesday, Friday, between an hour or 90 minutes and do a work session together with our Zooms on. And a little chat at the beginning and like a quiz at the end or stretches at the end or something that's like a little team activity. But people have been able to work, so it hasn't been distracting. And someone shares a Spotify playlist and you're all listening to it together. So you're technically doing stuff together in small different ways.
Right.
And
that's nice.
And then the other thing that we've done that's been really useful is we have something called Central Perk, which obviously is the cafe from Friends. And the idea is it started off as just like a drop-in. But now it's actually regimented, which is every Wednesday at 4 p.m., which covers most people's time zones in a relatively reasonable way, half an hour for fun and games. And someone is responsible for bringing the fun and games or a topic of conversation or whatever it is. And everyone drops in. We do breakout rooms. We bring people together. We're not allowed to talk about work. It runs for an hour, but you can leave after half an hour.
And is Central Perk a platform?
No, it's just,
what you've coined it.
Zoom with the background
okay.
screen of Central Perk.
Yeah, I like it.
But the idea is, it's a coffee shop.
Yeah.
And we're just here to like facilitate some non-work stuff. And it's important. It's really important to make space. And as the leader, it's important for your team to know that it isn't all about work. Like there is opportunity to communicate, to talk about other things, to bring people together. And actually the little remote, the remote get-togethers that we've had for the team that we've created, they have been incredibly valuable opportunities to express our company values. So, asking a pertinent question around one of our company values and asking other people to talk about, how and why that means X, Y, or Z in this scenario. It just means you get these little nudges because, company values are the hardest things. Basically what happens with company values in general, founder makes them up. Mm-hmm. They're not really based on very much other than like how they felt that day. Yeah. And so
Google.
Right. What are good company values? Okay, those look cool. I'll just adapt them and like make them make sense. And then I'll tell everyone what they are. Yeah. And it just doesn't work.
I did that with Nick Telson's at Trumpet.
Yeah.
I saw his LinkedIn post and I was like, oh, I'll take this and adapt it. And I was like, not sure this is actually the right way to do it.
The thing is, you can do it, but it doesn't mean anything to anyone, right? So then it's about how do you instill them? Exactly. And company values are all about, intrinsically, they're about behaviors. So, how do you create behaviors that mean those things? So, to give you an idea at Heights, what we do here, we've got 4 company values. So when we started Heights, we had 3 company values. So Joel and I sat down and worked on what our 3 company values were. And we wrote these down. We worked with psychologists, firstly, to work them out. We did personality profiles, mapped them out, saw where Joel was, where I was. Therefore, where is our common ground psychologically? What are the things we absolutely agree on? These are already behaviors that we live and we think are really important. So those things, write down all the things that are important to us. Where do they match? These 3 things are our company values. A year in, and by the way, with the 3 company values, we then wrote our interview questions for people we would hire in the future so that we were hiring people that lived the values and exhibited the behaviors that we know to be important to build a company around.
What were those 3?
So those 3 at the time were keep a sense of humor and humility.
Yep.
They were don't ask Google. No, have you asked Google? But that was a passive aggressive V1 version of it. So we changed it to take the initiative. Cause we're like, that's a bit more, encouraging. And it was care without compromise.
Interesting.
And so the 3 company values were how we hired the first people at Heights. When we got to 10 people at Heights, we then worked together with the company over a quarter to say, hey, these are 3 values, but they don't necessarily mean that they're the 3 values for the next 20 employees, 50 employees, whatever. So do we still think we live these? What don't we live? What needs to be changed? How do we need to do that? And we went through the process with the team then and turned these 3 into 4 company values that have been how we exhibit and build the company around now. So a couple changed and a couple stayed. So the ones that stayed were care without compromise and keep a sense of humor and humility. And what changed is they're now build trust and be trusting. So build trust and be trusting. And the idea around that is trust is so important in the supplement space because no one trusts them. Trust is important for psychological safety to give feedback and actually grow in a company. But trust is something you earn. So build trust is something that you have to do over time inside a company, and be trusting is the other side of it, right? You have to give people the opportunity to trust them too. It's really important for us. And then the 4th one is grow for it, because we need a growth mindset really if you're building a startup, because we recognize you could have the first 3 values and be a lifestyle company. Make a really lovely, soft, cozy place to work where stuff doesn't really matter. Oh, we care without compromise and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, we're building a startup. We do performance management. You are measured on how you're living these behaviors, and you're also measured on your results. Like this is an adult company for serious people that are looking to build a category. So you don't do that without treating people like adults and saying, this is what you're signing up for. So the grow for it value encapsulates the fact that we're a fast growth startup, and it's super important that we are growing and we are trying to push through various barriers that come up ahead.
Are you concerned about the cost of living crisis? Because obviously that's kind of the first thing that people were like, oh God, I'll review my subscriptions. I'll get rid of that, and that.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's better, on the basis that people have been through COVID and understand the importance of health and mental health. It's less concerning, but in the same way that everyone cared about masks and now no one wears any, this stuff does go away quite quickly. So I'm definitely concerned about that. At the end of the day, if you're not concerned about the cost of living crisis and how it's going to impact your business, you are enormously naive and in for a real shock.
How are you counterbalancing that with building a CPG company?
It's a great question. And I don't yet have an answer because obviously we're bringing out a second product. The problem that we have with our product in general is it's exceptionally high quality and a lot cheaper than buying the stuff separately, but supplements are poor quality and low price. So price anchoring in people's heads is all wrong where it comes to supplements. So
it's one of the things Abby keeps saying about how it's just like, oh God, it's expensive.
Yeah, and we can't make it cheaper. Like it isn't practical to make it cheaper. It's virtually impossible. Like, you know, and also we get taxed VAT, so 17% on health supplements, which is absurd. So margin is actually tiny because you're providing the highest quality.
If you don't mind me asking.
So typically speaking, where we want to get margin to is 50%.
Right.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
But that's like the ever, and that's the thing. And then a cost of living crisis does not help.
No.
Right. And so because all of our costs go up.
Yeah, of course.
And we literally, I mean, we don't know, but we believe that we can't charge more for this. Otherwise, you know, I believe that. I don't know it's true. You know, everyone I speak to about this actually disagrees. But I just think that people already think that Heights is expensive. You know, we've done the analysis. I did this when I first met the founder of Planet Organic. I bought everything that's in Heights in Planet Organic and I gave it to her. And she's one of our longer serving customers at this point, and she has subscriptions for her whole family as well. But I gave her a bill of £120. That's how much it costs to buy the quantity and the ingredients that are in Heights. And I was like, you can get all of this for £33 a month. And she was like, that's amazing. I'm genuinely sold. She became one of our investors. She's been one of our first customers. It's quite a punchy move. But the point was, this is how much it costs to put quality ingredients inside your body. So it's really hard. Price is already one of the hardest things to figure out as an entrepreneur. But against a cost of living crisis where your margin is already really bad comparatively in the supplement space. Supplement space in general targets 70 to 80% margin, but it's because they put crap in there and they fill them up with crap, and crap is cheap. And they still charge cheap, but there's super proper crap in there, and the lowest amount that you can possibly get away with putting in. So typically speaking, in the supplement space, the margins are 70 to 80%. Ours are 50, no, not yet 50, targeting 50, and that would be good for us. Like that is like literally our pipe dream of getting to 50, and we're still far away from that, and people still think it's expensive. So it's challenging. It's interesting, depending on what category you're in, but choosing quality is a challenging strategy.
It is. I always look at quality versus time versus speed.
Yeah.
And that's really fucked us, actually. We chose speed over quality, which actually has prolonged time to ship.
Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it?
And it's such a painful lesson to learn. I actually wanted to finish on you becoming a father, because there's going to be a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of founders who go through, and investors who go through this period of working out, whether they want children, because I think actually you were a bit on the fence, right, for a long, long time.
Yep.
And then having one, trying to basically juggle building a company or building their baby and also having a baby.
Yeah.
How's it changed you?
So ironically, my business partner, Joel, as well, had a baby 5 months after I did. So it's been challenging because we're both in a similar boat. Yeah. And, you know, how it's changed me, the biggest change has been routine. So I now have a routine that's very clear. And also, you know, I found it a great growth opportunity to learn how to instill my brain care habits, like the things that matter to me, the things I know are going to keep me sharp and mentally well. You know, figuring out how that routine works around a baby, and actually that a baby's development changes so much every month or two. So as soon as you start to nail your routine, they need a new routine, and so do you. That's been genuinely, I frame that as a growth opportunity. Of course, I've had my moments where I'm like, go fuck yourself, to me and the baby. But ultimately, for a while, you know, you can't change your reality.
No.
And so figuring out how I'm going to approach it and coming up with a new routine that works around it, I've actually quite enjoyed. But the routine thing is interesting because bedtime is a fascinating one. So I'm used to, I'm not here to promote hustle porn, but obviously, like most entrepreneurs can appreciate, if you're engrossed in what you do and you're loving it, you don't tend to just clock off because it's the end of the work day. You can easily push through and quite comfortably do, or sometimes that's better for your routine. My daughter's bath time's at 6:15. I do that until about 7, and then I get her ready for bed. I do the night feed, and then get her sleeping in bed. And, that whole routine will maybe take 6:15 to 7:30, 8 p.m., depending on how she is at getting down. And that's a personal choice. I decided a year ago when I had her, I want to be a really present dad. That's the benefit of being in a remote company. I never have to miss bath time. And if I do miss bath time, there has to be a good reason. A good reason might be that someone's invited me out, but now when people invite me out and say, do you want to come out at night or whatever, I'm like, that's not worth missing bath time for, because I've said to myself, I want to be a great father. And that's what I believe is like great in my definition, is being there in the mornings, being there in the evenings, doing the main things. Mum has been on maternity for a year. She's back at work now, but she's been there present in the rest of the times, but I want to be as present as I possibly can. And the bits that I'm not at work, I wanted to be there and learning and enjoying that opportunity as fully as I possibly could. So that has created a very unusual to me experience where I start winding down at 6 p.m. for work, regardless of what flow I'm in or anything else. And that's been crazy. And you know what? Like, the reality is I've been probably just as productive, not the first 3 months. I mean, the first 3 months are a massive write-off. But generally speaking, I've been, just as productive, just as useful. I've known how much time I have in a day. So therefore, I've tried to faff less and do more in the time I have. It's provided good barriers.
In a very weird way. It's not a weird way. We have the same experience with dogs.
Yes.
Because we have 2. And
dogs are great training for babies, FYI.
Yeah.
Cats, not so much.
No. But you're right.
But any pet is a great step.
5:30. They are both at my fucking desk going, hey, we want to go out.
Yeah.
So I drop everything and I take them out for an hour, come back, feed them, literally have to kind of father them so that they're not a nightmare in the evening.
Yeah, totally.
Choose playtime, all this kind of stuff. And and then by the time we have dinner and make dinner, it's getting to like 7 o'clock.
Yep.
Having
a responsibility like that, it shifts your focuses. So, my work is now no longer the most important thing. The most important thing for me is learning how to be a great dad. I had a great dad. I have a great mum. I think it's awesome to be it's a massive responsibility to be an amazing parent. You're bringing someone up into the world. You don't want them to turn into Hitler. Ideally, they turn into more a Gandhi than a Hitler. What is your responsibility in that? Quite large. Not everything, because obviously they'll end up spending more time at school and with their friends than they will you, but you can do your bit for sure.
Yeah.
So, I see that as an opportunity to do my bit, and I really enjoy doing it as well.
This has been awesome, mate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in. Thank you for getting vulnerable. Does the mic keep going in and out?
Only just literally then.
Right. It's been great to sit down with you.
Yeah.
So we'll call it a day there.
Thanks, mate.
Top man.